The steel screamed before it snapped. 2,000 pounds of scaffolding twisted loose on the 38th floor of Orion Heights, crashing toward the most feared CEO in Chicago. Executives froze. Investors screamed. But one man ran forward. Daniel Hayes, a janitor making $10 an hour, dove into the collapse zone and dragged Alexandra Reed out with seconds to spare. When the dust settled, she stared at him, shaken for the first time in years. "Who are you?" she asked. He wiped blood from his brow and answered quietly. "Nobody important." He was wrong. Alexandra Reed arrived at Reed Global's headquarters at 6:47 every morning, 13 minutes before the building unlocked for everyone else. She had a key because she owned the building. She had a routine because she trusted nothing she couldn't control. On the 53rd floor, the air tasted different, filtered, cool, curated. Her corner office faced north and east, which meant she saw the sunrise and the lake simultaneously, two things that could not disappoint her as long as she did not ask too much of them. She was 41 years old. She had built Reed Global from a consulting firm with 6 employees into an infrastructure development company managing $14 billion in active contracts. She had done this through a combination of forensic attention to detail, an ability to identify structural weaknesses in deals before anyone else in the room, and a willingness to cut anything that slowed her down: deadlines, partnerships, people. The executive floor operated on a kind of ambient fear, not hostility. Her staff were well compensated, well resourced, and left alone to do their jobs. The fear was more architectural, a sense that imprecision had consequences. Her assistant, Nathan, had been with her 6 years and had learned to anticipate what she needed before she asked. He did not offer her coffee unless she had already glanced at the credenza. He did not summarize her calendar unless she was already reaching for it. She had never told him these things. He had simply learned. That morning, she reviewed the structural timeline for Orion Heights, a 42-story mixed-use tower in the South Loop that had been 2 months behind schedule since January. The general contractor, a firm called Apex Build Partners, had assured her repeatedly that the delays were supply chain related. She had begun to doubt this. 14 miles away, on the ground level of the same project, Daniel Hayes was mopping a stairwell that smelled of joint compound and cigarette smoke. He wore a gray uniform with the Apex Build Partners logo on the chest pocket. The logo was iron-on and had started to peel at the lower left corner. He had not bothered to fix it. It was 6:50 inches the morning. He had already been there for 2 hours. At 4:45, he had dropped his daughter Lily, age 7, at his neighbor Mrs. Paulson's apartment 2 floors below his own. Lily had been asleep when he carried her, her head against his shoulder, her sneakers untied. He had tied them before he put her on Mrs. Paulson's couch, not because she needed them tied to sleep, but because he found the act of doing it calming. Small correctness, the things you could actually fix. Daniel Hayes was 38 years old. He had a bachelor's in civil engineering from the University of Illinois and had completed 2 years of a master's program at MIT before his mother's illness pulled him home. He had worked for a structural engineering firm called Garrett and Morse for 9 years, rising to senior project engineer. He had won a regional design award in 2017 for a pedestrian bridge in Evanston that incorporated recycled steel tensile elements in a configuration that reduced material cost by 22% without compromising load tolerance. His wife, Rachel, had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the spring of 2019. The treatment was aggressive and expensive and ultimately ineffective. She died in November of 2020, 14 months after the diagnosis, 3 weeks before Lily's 3rd birthday. The medical debt was $214,000 after insurance. The firm he'd been working for at the time, a smaller outfit he'd joined for the flexibility, went under during the pandemic. He'd spent 2 years cycling through contract work, then a desk job at a city permit office that paid steadily but not enough, and then, When the debt consolidation plan he'd negotiated required a higher monthly payment than he could manage, he had taken the Apex Build Partners maintenance position because it paid $17 an hour, plus overtime, and the overtime was consistent. He mopped, he swept, he cataloged equipment, and he watched. He could not stop watching. It was not a professional habit anymore, it was something older, something the training had layered over instinct without replacing it. When he walked a job site, he read it. Load paths, material grades, fastener patterns. He saw things the way a musician hears pitch, not as effort, but as sensation. That morning, moving past the north elevation's forming work, he noticed the anchor bolts on a set of third-floor column bases. They looked wrong. Not dramatically wrong, subtly wrong. The spacing was correct. The depth looked right. But the bolt diameter he crouched looked closer. The bolt diameter was not what the spec called for. He had seen the spec once, months earlier, taped to a superintendent's clipboard. He remembered it the way he remembered most things. Completely. He stood up, wrote nothing down. But he did not forget. Alexandra Reed walked the 38th floor of Orion Heights at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday in early April, with 3 investors from a pension fund consortium, her project director Nathan Hale, and Richard Cole, the Apex Build Partners vice president who managed the Reed Global relationship. Richard was 53, silver-haired, with the kind of expansive ease that came from 2 decades of managing people who needed something from him. He wore a hard hat that sat slightly too high on his head, the way hard hats sit on people who are not used to wearing them. He called Alexandra Alex in front of investors, which she had asked him twice not to do. The tour was proceeding well. The investors were impressed by the view, by the floor-to-ceiling framing, by the sense of scale. Richard was describing the projected amenity deck when Alexandra stopped walking. She had seen something on the exterior scaffolding through the open framing gap, a lateral brace that looked misaligned. It was not her area of expertise, but she had looked at enough structural drawings over enough years to register when something did not match its drawing. She stepped closer to the edge. "Miss Reed." Nathan's voice behind her, careful. "I'm fine." She leaned slightly, trying to get the angle on the brace. Below, 40 stories of air. Chicago's grid spread out like circuitry. She was not afraid of heights. She had never understood people who were. The sound was not loud at first. It was more of a resonance, a vibration in the floor, in the air, in her back teeth. Then the metal groan arrived, low and structural, the sound of a load path failing. And then, movement, fast, a shadow from above. She had no time to think. She had time only to register the incoming mass, 2,000 pounds of scaffolding system, exterior platform, and lateral bracing, and to understand, in the most elemental way, that she could not move fast enough. Someone moved for her. A hand caught her left arm. A body hit her from the right. She went down hard, concrete floor, left shoulder taking most of it, and then the collapse arrived where she had been standing. The sound was immense, dust and steel and the smell of concrete powder. One of the investors was screaming. Nathan was shouting her name. She was on the floor, alive. Her left shoulder ached. There was blood on her right hand from where she'd caught herself. The man who had pulled her was on one knee beside her, gray uniform, peeling logo. He had a cut above his left eyebrow. The edge of a flying bolt or bracket had clipped him, and blood was tracking down toward his eye. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they've just grabbed before they've fully processed that they grabbed it. Assessment first, reaction later. "Are you hurt?" he said. "My shoulder. Move your fingers." She did. He nodded. "Not dislocated, probably bruised. You should have it looked at." The investors were being ushered back by Richard's team. Nathan was already on his phone. Someone was calling 911. Alexandra Reed sat on the floor of the 38th story of a building she owned, covered in concrete dust, and looked at the man who had just saved her life. "Who are you?" she asked. He pressed the back of his wrist to the cut above his eye. "Nobody important." "That's not an answer." "Daniel Hayes, maintenance." She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at where the scaffolding had come down, the torn bolts, the buckled frame, the sheared anchor plate. She looked at it with the part of her brain that never stopped working. "That bracket," she said. "It failed at the base." Daniel Hayes looked at the bracket. Then he looked at her. "Yes," he said. She asked Nathan for his file before she left the hospital. The shoulder was bruised, not fractured. She was given ice, an anti-inflammatory, and instructions she would not follow. Nathan sent the file to her phone while she was still in the examination room. She read it in the car back to the office. Daniel Hayes. Born 1,986 inches, Rockford, Illinois. B.S. Civil Engineering. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, 2008. Graduate Studies, MIT, 2009-2011, incomplete. 9 years at Garrett and Morse Structural Engineering. Regional Design Award. Illinois Chapter of the Structural Engineers Association, 2017. She scrolled further. Garrett and Morse had dissolved in 2021. Prior to that, a smaller firm. She recognized the name. They had done work she'd looked at once on a riverfront project that never got permitted. Good work. Then the gap. 2 years of contract labor, a city permit desk, and then the Apex Build Partners maintenance roster. She put her phone down. She looked out the car window at the expressway moving past. Nathan, in the passenger seat, was diplomatically silent. "Pull his full employment history," she said, "and get me everything Reed Global's HR has on how maintenance contractors are hired at active project sites." Already sent the request. She was quiet for a moment. The city slid by. How does someone with an MIT engineering background end up on a maintenance crew? Nathan did not answer immediately. He knew her well enough to know that was not a question requiring an answer. It was the beginning of something. She was right. 2 days later, she knew about Rachel. She had not asked for that information. It had come through a background supplement her HR team included as standard. She read it once, put her phone face down on her desk, did not pick it up again for 11 minutes, which was a long time for her. She thought about a man carrying a sleeping child to a neighbor's apartment at 4:45 inches the morning so he could mop staircases at a construction site where he silently watched materials being installed wrong and said nothing, because it was not, technically, his job. She thought about the anchor bolts. She met Daniel Hayes in a conference room on the 22nd floor. Not her floor, not the project floor. Neutral ground. He arrived in the same gray uniform. She had offered to send a car. He had declined. He sat across the table from her and did not seem uncomfortable, which surprised her. Most people were uncomfortable meeting with her. He seemed, if anything, focused, present in the specific way that people are when they have decided in advance what they are willing to say. "You noticed the bracket before it failed," she said. "Nathan's security review confirmed you'd been standing near that section of the floor earlier." "I noticed something," he said. "What did you notice?" A pause. Not evasion, precision. The lateral bracing on the exterior platform had been modified from the original installation. The clip angles were undersized, and the anchor plate for the top support wasn't drilled to spec. The hole pattern was off by about 3/8 of an inch, which under dynamic load would migrate the stress concentration to the base anchor. She finished. He looked at her. "Yes, you've seen the structural drawings for this project. I saw part of a spec sheet once, taped to a superintendent's clipboard." For about 40 seconds, she studied him. "And you remembered it." He did not respond to that as if it were a compliment. He simply nodded. "I want you to look at the full project drawings," she said. Formally. As a consultant, he was quiet. Outside, 42 stories down, Chicago moved. "That's not a small thing," he said. "If there's something wrong with this building and I find it, what happens to my job? What happens to the people who need this project to close? I need to know the truth about what's in that building before anyone else gets hurt." "That's not what I asked." She respected that. "I'll protect your employment. Whatever you find, your position with Reed Global is guaranteed." "Not Apex Reed Global directly, and whatever the findings are, decisions are mine, not yours." He thought about it. "Not long. But genuinely, my daughter," he said. "Her school lets out at 3. Some days I can't pick her up until 5. On those days, she comes here and does her homework in the break room. That stays." Alexandra Reed blinked once. "Agreed. Tuesdays she comes regardless, whether I'm here or not." "Fine." He nodded. Then, yes, he worked evenings after Lily was asleep. Mrs. Paulson's fee had gone up slightly. Daniel had not mentioned this to Alexandra, simply absorbed it, and he spread the full drawing set across the folding table in his kitchen with the overhead light on and a cup of coffee that went cold before he drank it. What he found methodically. He started with the foundation. The geotechnical report called for drilled concrete piers with a minimum compressive strength of 5,000 pounds per square inches. He cross-referenced the mix design documentation submitted to the city. Then he found a discrepancy. The mix approval had been issued for 5,000 pounds per square inches. But the on-site batch records, buried in a contractor submittal package he had to request 3 times before it was provided, showed a consistent 3,800 pounds per square inches mix being used. The difference was not cosmetic. At 42 stories, under full occupancy load plus wind, the foundation columns were operating on a safety margin that was not a margin at all. He moved to the superstructure. The original design specified high-strength steel for the primary lateral force-resisting frame, the skeleton that would hold the building upright in a wind event or seismic disturbance. The procurement records showed a substitution. The substitute alloy was listed as equivalent performance in a document signed by a materials engineer whose license, when Daniel checked a state registry, had been suspended 18 months earlier. He kept going. The HVAC ductwork penetrations through the floor slabs, supposed to be sleeve and collar assemblies, with rated fire stopping, had been roughed in with foam backer rod and a non-rated sealant. A fire would have pathways through every floor. He sat with it all for a long time before he called her. It was 11:40 at night. "This building has approximately 5 to 10 years before it presents a serious structural risk," he said when she picked up. "That's not a dramatic estimate. That's load cycles, material degradation, and the original safety margins that no longer exist." She was quiet on the other end. "How many units are pre-sold?" he asked. 214. He said nothing. "Who else could have known this was happening?" she said. Her voice had changed. Not softer, exactly, but the practiced control had thinned. Someone approved the material substitutions. Someone signed off on the batch records. "This isn't an accident, Miss Reed. These are a series of deliberate decisions that each saved money." Another long silence. "Richard Cole manages the Apex relationship," she said quietly. "That's your department," he said. "I'm just telling you what the building says." She asked him not to do it. He did it anyway. At 1:15 inches the morning, 12 days after their conference room meeting, Daniel Hayes let himself into the Orion Heights site through a loading door on the B2 level whose keypad code he had memorized from watching a superintendent enter it 6 weeks earlier. He carried a rotary hammer drill, 2 core bits, a portable light stand, and a sample collection kit he'd borrowed from a testing lab contact he still had from his Garrett and Morse years. He needed ground truth. The batch records could be falsified. The documentation trail could be managed. But concrete does not lie. If you cut into it, it tells you exactly what it is. He drilled 2 samples from foundation column bases on opposite corners of the building the locations that would show the highest stress concentration under asymmetric load. The cores came out smooth and clean, which was good. Then he looked at them under his portable light. The aggregate was wrong. Too much fine material, not enough coarse. And there, in the second sample, visible to anyone who knew what to look for, a void, a pocket of air in the middle of a structural column, roughly the size of a closed fist. He sat on the concrete floor of the basement of a 42-story building in the middle of Chicago and held a hollow piece of its skeleton in his hands. He called her at 1:58 a.m. "I have physical samples," he said. "Foundation column at grid B3 and grid F7. Both show aggregate inconsistency with the design specification. The F7 sample has a void." A long pause. "How big?" she asked. "About 4 centimeters diameter." In a 600 millimeter column. He heard her breath. Not a gasp, something more controlled. Something that started as a gasp and was managed back into breath. He had learned by then that this was what emotion looked like on Alexandra Reed, a thing that almost happened. "Send me photos," she said. "Already sent." She did not say anything for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was level, but it had the specific quality of a voice that has made a decision it cannot take back. "I need you to document everything. Full chain of custody, lab verification. I need this bulletproof." "I know," he said. She hesitated. Then, "Thank you." He did not know how to receive that from her, so he didn't try. The sabotage became clear on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks before the project's scheduled public milestone. Daniel was on the East Service elevator at 7:20 a.m., riding up with 2 members of the mechanical installation crew when the site radio crackled with an alert he recognized before the words fully resolved. A crane cable failure on the west face. He was off the elevator at the next floor and moving before the foreman on the radio finished his sentence. The tower crane's hoist cable had parted. Not frayed, parted. Clean failure at a point approximately 80 feet above the working deck. 2 ironworkers were stranded on a secondary platform that was now swinging freely, its counterweight system compromised by the cable loss. They were not in immediate danger of falling. They were in danger of the platform continuing to rotate until the remaining attachment points sheared. The correct response was to call the crane emergency line, wait for a rescue crew, and clear the area. Daniel had already calculated that the remaining attachment points would not hold for the 40 to 60 minutes that process would take. He found the vertical access ladder on the mast. He climbed. 80 feet is not a long climb in absolute terms. At height, with wind off the lake running at 12 knots, with a failed cable trailing below him and a swinging platform above, it took 11 minutes. He did not think about Lily. He had learned a long time ago that thinking about the thing you most wanted to get back to was the most effective way to freeze at height. He thought instead about the load path, the geometry, the clamp assembly he had spotted on the maintenance rack 3 floors down and grabbed on his way to the ladder. He reached the platform connection point. The 2 workers, both young, one of them visibly praying, watched him work the manual clamp onto the secondary tie-off lug. His hands were steady. He had always had steady hands. When the clamp was locked, he looked at the cable end. The failure surface was wrong. Steel fatigues in a specific pattern, progressive cracking, chevron marks, a texture that tells a story of load cycles. This surface was smooth, corroded, the kind of corrosion you get from chemical exposure. He took out his phone, took 2 photos, climbed down. He called Nathan from the ground. The photos were in Alexandra's hands within the hour. Her materials consultant confirmed it by early afternoon. The cable had been treated with a dilute hydrochloric acid solution at some point in the past 3 to 6 weeks. The corrosion was targeted. Intentional. "He's short-selling Reed Global stock," Alexandra said in her office that afternoon. The door closed, Nathan and Daniel the only other people in the room. Her voice was absolutely flat. "Richard Cole, His trading disclosure filed last quarter showed a position I didn't think much of. But if he knew the building was compromised, and if this became public in a controlled way, he profits when the stock drops, Nathan said. He doesn't just profit. She looked at Daniel. He built the position large enough that a significant stock event would cover most of the original budget variance. He stole money, building it wrong, then set up a bet that the truth would come out on his timeline. Daniel said nothing. He was thinking about the 2 ironworkers on the platform. He was thinking about 214 pre-sold units. He was thinking about Lily asking him last Tuesday why he seemed tired. "We need to move quickly," he said, before he realizes the cable failure didn't go the way he planned. The plan was not elegant. It was the kind of plan that works when the people executing it have specific knowledge, specific access, and specific reasons not to fail. Daniel had spent months on that site. He knew every service entrance, every camera blind spot, every elevator schedule. He also knew the cleaning crew had eaten lunch with them on a dozen occasions in the B1 break room, listening more than talking, in the way that people who are genuinely interested in others tend to do. Maria Delgado had been on the overnight cleaning rotation for Apex's administrative offices on the 14th floor for 7 months. She was sharp, she was observant, and she had been quietly furious for 4 of those months about a document shredding protocol that had started after the scaffolding collapse. A directive that came directly from Richard Cole's office and required all paper, communications related to Orion Heights, to be destroyed within 48 hours of receipt. Maria had been shredding documents, but she was also a mother, and she had an instinct for when something going into a shredder mattered, and she had, over 4 months, quietly reconstructed dozens of partial documents by taping together the contents of bags before they went to the dumpster. She kept them folded in the back of her locker. She had not known what to do with them. She had been waiting for a reason to trust someone. Daniel gave her that reason on a Tuesday evening while Lily was doing multiplication tables at the break room table and Maria was on her way to the elevator. "Those documents," he said quietly. "I think they matter. I think someone who can act on them is ready to act." She looked at him. Then she went to her locker. The documents were partial, but they were enough. Purchase orders for materials that didn't match what was installed. Sign-off sheets with signatures that didn't match the licensed engineers on record. And one complete internal email, printed and then apparently forgotten in the shredding queue, in which Richard Cole described the material substitution program as the gap management approach, and referenced a wire transfer account in a name that was not Apex Build Partners. Alexandra's legal team had the documents by 9 p.m. The wire transfer account, traced through a financial forensics contact, connected to an LLC registered in Delaware, whose beneficial owner confirmed by 11:15 p.m. was Richard Cole. The server room access was the last piece. Apex maintained a project management server on the 50th floor of Reed Global's headquarters, a legacy arrangement from an earlier phase of the partnership. The server contained the original communication logs. Richard had not wiped them because he believed he controlled who could access them. He did not control Carmen Okafor. Carmen was a Reed Global Facilities technician who had been quietly documenting an HR complaint against a supervisor for 3 months. She was not involved in the investigation. She was, however, on duty at 11:30 p.m. when she received a call from a number she recognized as Nathan Hales. "I need access to the 50th floor server room," Nathan said. "I need it now. I need you to not ask me about it until tomorrow morning." Carmen had worked at Reed Global for 6 years. She had formed her own opinion of Alexandra Reed over that time, an opinion that included the understanding that the woman was difficult, demanding, and genuinely incapable of ethical compromise when she understood what was at stake. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Carmen said. Richard Cole arrived at Reed Global's building at 1240 a.m. He had been called by a member of his own team who had noticed anomalous login activity on the project server. He walked through the lobby with the kind of composed urgency that people who are planning to destroy evidence manage. Daniel was waiting in the second-floor stairwell. He did not block Richard's path. He simply stepped into the corridor as Richard came through the door and said, "The wire transfer records are already in police custody." Richard Cole looked at him. For a moment, something passed across his face: recognition, calculation, and then a specific kind of collapse that happens when a man who has been building an alternative story for years understands that the story is over. "You're the janitor," Richard said. "I'm the person who read the drawings," Daniel said. Upstairs, Alexandra had already called the Financial Crimes Division of the Chicago PD. The detective on the other end of the line took notes with the patience of someone who had been doing this for a long time and who had heard a lot of things, but who had not often heard a CEO read him a wire transfer account number, a Delaware LLC registration, and a materials fraud timeline from memory at 12:47 inches the morning. 2 officers arrived at 1:05 a.m. Richard Cole was arrested in the lobby of the building he had been defrauding for 2.5 years. He said nothing as they walked him out. He did not look back. She called the press conference herself. It was not a crisis communications strategy. There was no media training briefer in the room, no PR firm preparing talking points. Nathan had suggested both. She had said no to both. She stood at a podium in a Reed Global conference room on a Friday morning with 47 journalists, a dozen cameras, and a board of directors who had received a 3-sentence summary of what she was about to say 12 minutes before she walked in. 12 minutes because she had judged that giving them more time would result in someone calling a lawyer to advise her not to do what she was about to do. "Orion Heights will not open," she said. "It will be demolished. The structural work performed by Apex Build Partners under the oversight of Richard Cole was deliberately fraudulent. The building is not safe. It will not be made safe by remediation. The scale of the substitution program affects too many primary systems. It will be torn down." The room was silent for about 2 seconds. Then it was not. Reed Global's stock dropped 14% in the first hour of trading. By midday, it had recovered 5 points, which a financial analyst on a cable business channel described as unexpected. The analyst did not know about the press conference tone. She had not understood, from the transcript, that what Alexandra had communicated was not panic but decision. The board met that afternoon. 3 members formally requested her resignation. She sat through each request with the patience of someone who had heard the arguments before, understood them, and had already decided. "The building was fraudulent before I knew it was fraudulent," she said. "I am accountable for not knowing sooner, but I am not accountable for the fraud. I will not resign because someone defrauded my company, and I then chose to tell the public the truth." She remained CEO. The 3 board members resigned instead. This was not something she had planned. It was, she reflected, something she should have expected, that the people most invested in the appearance of stability were also the people least equipped to handle the reality of accountability. The 214 pre-sold unit holders received full refunds plus a penalty payment she had authorized without consulting the board. The refunds cost Reed Global $31 million. She considered this a necessary expense in the category of things that were simply right. Daniel Hayes learned about the press conference from Nathan, who called him at 7:30 a.m. on a Friday while he was walking Lily to school. "She's tearing it down," Nathan said. Daniel said nothing for a moment. Lily was ahead of him on the sidewalk, stepping deliberately on every crack. "That's the right call," he said. "The board is trying to push her out. She'll be fine." Nathan paused. "How do you know?" Daniel watched his daughter navigate a particularly complicated section of sidewalk with total concentration, because she understands the difference between what she can defend and what she can't. She'll only fight for things she can defend. The park was not a famous park. It was 3 blocks from their apartment, the kind of city park that functions primarily as a cut-through on weekdays and a gathering place on weekends, with a jungle gym that had been repainted twice in the past decade, and a set of benches along the north edge that caught the afternoon sun. Daniel and Lily were on the benches on a Saturday in late May, 4 weeks after the press conference. Lily had a sketchbook, a real one, not a notebook, with heavy toothpaper that she had received for her birthday and treated with a seriousness that her teacher had described, at the last conference, as remarkable for her age. She was drawing. Daniel watched her draw and drank cold coffee from a travel cup and did not think about anything in particular. He was the chief structural director of Reed Global's Project Integrity Division. He had been this for 3 weeks. The job had come with a salary he had not yet fully processed emotionally, a small team of structural review engineers who reported to him, and an office on the 22nd floor of the Reed Global building, not the 53rd floor, which he had declined when Alexandra offered it, because he did not want to spend his days in a place where the air felt managed. Lily showed him the sketchbook. She had drawn a building. It was tall and narrow with careful vertical lines for windows and a structure at the top that was clearly, unmistakably, a garden. Trees on the roof, planters along the edge, a bird, small and slightly implausible, sitting on a parapet. "What building is this?" he asked. "The new one," she said. "The one you're going to build." He looked at it for a long time. "Daddy." She was looking up at him with the specific expression she used when she was about to say something she'd been thinking about for a while. "Buildings don't fall if you build them right, right?" He looked at her. At the drawing, at the garden on the roof and the bird on the parapet, and the careful lines of windows, and the foundation she hadn't drawn because it was underground, and she had understood, already, that the foundation was the part you didn't see. "Not if you build them with honesty," he said. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to drawing. 2 days later, Alexandra arrived at the park. He had told her where they would be. She had asked to see the sketch, which Lily had described in detail during a Tuesday afternoon at Reed Global, that had migrated from the break room to Alexandra's conference room when Lily had decided, with no particular ceremony, that Alexandra's table was better for drawing. She sat on the far end of the bench. She was not in a suit. She was in a dark jacket and running shoes, and she looked, if not exactly relaxed, then at least temporarily unarmored. Lily showed her the drawing without being asked. Alexandra studied it. She looked at the rooftop garden and the windows and the proportions, which were, Daniel had noted, architecturally reasonable for a child's sketch. She looked at it for long enough that Lily began to fidget. "The garden," Alexandra finally said. "Is that accessible to all the residents?" Lily frowned. "Of course." "No reason." Alexandra handed the sketchbook back. She looked at Daniel. "Our materials engineer wants to meet with you on the foundation specification for the new South Loop site, Monday or Tuesday." "Tuesday," he said. "After 3. She almost smiled. He saw it a thing that almost happened, and then was allowed to happen, just briefly, before her face returned to its practiced composure. But he had seen it. "Tuesday after 3, she said. Lily was already drawing again the same building, this time with more detail. She added a staircase along the side. She added people on the roof, small and specific, each one different. The afternoon light came through the trees in the way it does in May in Chicago, when the leaves are new and the air is still clean from rain and the city remembers. For a few weeks, each spring, what it looks like before summer takes hold. Daniel Hayes sat with his daughter on a bench in an ordinary park and felt the specific lightness of a person who has done what they came to do. Beside him, at a careful distance that was slowly becoming a shorter distance, Alexandra Reed watched a 7-year-old girl design a building that would not fall, because it was being built with honesty, and because the people building it finally knew the difference.